She was a young woman battling a rare autoimmune disease, trapped in relentless pain and isolation until life itself felt meaningless. She believed that closing her eyes would bring an end to all suffering, that everything would fade into nothingness. But instead, she was pulled into a terrifying journey, a path that led straight to hell. And there she encountered someone she never expected to see, Michael Jackson. Why was a music legend condemned to such a horrifying place? His chilling confession will send shivers down your spine. Was this just a hallucination or a shocking truth that has been hidden all along? Listen to this haunting testimony and decide for yourself. Hello, Eternal Bible Stories channel. My name is Shamel. I had this experience in February 2022. Recently, I had this relief to share my experiences. I was diagnosed with a rare and debilitating autoimmune disease when I was 20. Before, it started with chronic fatigue and joint pain that progressively worsened. Everyday tasks became monumental challenges, and my once active life turned into a constant battle against my own body. Medications helped only so much. The side effects often felt as debilitating as the symptoms they were meant to treat. The disease not only ravaged my body, but also stripped away the life I knew. I lost my job because I could no longer keep up with the demands. My friends, initially supportive, began to drift away as my condition required more understanding and patience than they could provide. I understood their discomfort, but it didn't make the loneliness any easier to bear. People's behavior towards me changed drastically. Strangers in public stared at me with a mix of curiosity and pity when I used a cane to walk. Some even whispered behind my back, not realizing or perhaps not caring that I could hear them. The most painful moments, however, came from those who knew me before I got sick. Former friends and acquaintances would say things like, "You don't look sick," or "Are you sure it's not all in your head?" I remember one particularly harsh day when I tried to join a group outing. I was excited to see my friends and be part of something fun, but the moment I arrived, I felt the shift. Conversations paused when I approached, and subtle glances were exchanged. When we walked to a nearby cafe, my pace was slower, and they grew impatient. Someone suggested I should just stay home and rest, masking their irritation with faux concern. I felt like a burden, an outsider in a circle I once belonged to. As the disease progressed, so did my isolation. Invitations to social events became rare, and those I did receive felt more like obligations from others than a genuine desire for my company. I spent countless hours alone, watching life go on without me from the window of my apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me in my solitude. Desperation crept in slowly but steadily. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I could count, haunted by thoughts of being a burden to my parents, the only people who seemed to care anymore. I imagined their lives without me, free from the constant worry and stress my illness caused them. The thought provided a twisted sense of comfort. Maybe they would be better off. One night, as the pain racked my body and the weight of loneliness crushed my spirit, I decided I couldn't bear it any longer. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of despair with no shore in sight. The idea of ending it all seemed like the only way to find peace. I sat at my desk, writing my last comfort note to my parents, tears smudging the ink as I tried to convey my love and my apologies. I slipped out of my home quietly, careful not to make a sound, ensuring that my parents remained undisturbed in their sleep. I didn't want them to hear me leaving. I didn't want them to stop me. As I stepped outside, the night air wrapped around me, cool and indifferent, mirroring the emptiness that had settled in my soul. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from hesitation, but from the weight of the decision I had made. I walked toward the secluded park, the only place that had ever brought me a sense of comfort. It had always been my escape, a refuge from a world that no longer had room for me. The trees stood like silent witnesses, their branches swaying gently under the dim glow of the streetlights. I could hear the distant hum of the city, but it felt like a world away, like I had already begun to detach from it. For weeks, I had been preparing for this moment, collecting my pain medication little by little, hiding the pills in a small secret compartment in my room. Each time I set one aside, it had felt like adding a stone to a path leading toward freedom. The idea of using drugs seemed almost poetic, a quiet, painless departure from a life that had become unbearable. No drama, no mess, no final cries for help, just a gentle slipping away, like a whisper fading into the night. I found my usual bench, the wooden slats worn down from years of use, and sat down. It felt familiar, grounding in a way that almost made me reconsider. Almost. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small stash of pills I had carefully hidden away. Pouring them into my hand, I stared at them. Tiny, unassuming capsules, their smooth surfaces glistening faintly under the dim light. They looked harmless, just medication, but I knew better. In my palm lay the power to end everything, to make the pain disappear, to stop being a burden, to finally be at peace. A sharp pang of doubt cut through me, a brief flicker of hesitation. Was this really what I wanted? Was there any chance, any sliver of hope that things could change? But then I thought about tomorrow, and the day after that, and every excruciating, lonely day stretching ahead of me like an endless void. The doctors had no cure. My friends had faded away. My parents, as much as they loved me, deserved a life free from the constant worry and stress of taking care of someone who was slowly wasting away. Swallowing hard, I forced down my hesitation along with the first handful of pills, then another and another, each one a step closer to silence, to the peace I had longed for. As the drugs took hold, a heavy drowsiness settled over me, wrapping itself around my body like a thick fog. The physical pain that had gripped me for so long began to loosen its claws, melting away into a strange numbness. My limbs grew heavy, my head light, my vision blurred, the edges of the world softening as if reality itself were dissolving around me. I lay back against the bench, looking up at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly, distant and indifferent, like tiny pinpricks in an endless void. The darkness was closing in now, wrapping me in its embrace, and with it came a quiet sense of relief. Finally, it was ending. Finally, I was free. My thoughts drifted to my parents. My final wish was for their happiness and peace. I wanted them to remember me not as a burden, but as someone who had loved them deeply. Someone who had fought for as long as they could, but was simply too tired to go on. Someone who was finally at rest. The world around me faded, my body sinking deeper into the abyss of unconsciousness. With one last, shuddering breath, I closed my eyes, welcoming the darkness that I believed would take me to a place beyond pain. But then, something unexpected happened. As the darkness swallowed me whole, I felt something else, a sudden intense weightlessness, as if a great burden had been lifted from my chest. The pain, the suffering, the exhaustion, all of it dissolved into nothingness. For the first time in years, I felt free. It was as if I had been unchained from the physical world. But I was about to learn that death was not the escape I had imagined. My journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I opened my eyes, expecting to see nothing but an endless void, a black abyss that would swallow me whole. Instead, I found myself hovering above the park bench where my lifeless body lay. The sight was surreal, my still form resting against the wooden slats, eyes closed, skin pale under the dim glow of the streetlights. It was a jarring contradiction. I was there, yet I wasn't. The world around me felt altered. It was no longer the same familiar place I had known in life. Everything had a ghostly, ethereal quality, as if reality itself had been drained of color. The hues were muted, the sharp edges of the physical world softened, and a strange glow illuminated everything, though there was no clear source of light. It was neither warm nor cold, just an eerie luminescence that made everything seem both real and unreal at the same time. I glanced down at my body, the empty shell that once housed my pain, my suffering, my very existence. It felt distant now, like an old memory of a person I barely recognized. All the weight, the burdens of life, the endless agony that had defined my every waking moment, it was all gone, left behind in that unmoving figure below me. And yet, despite the relief, a creeping unease settled in. For a moment I simply hovered there, suspended between two worlds, unsure of what to do or feel. There was an undeniable sense of liberation, but it was quickly overtaken by something else, a deep and unsettling confusion. Was this death, or was this something else entirely? The thought circled in my mind, but no answers came. Instead, there was only an overwhelming detachment, as if I had become an observer in a dream I could not wake from. Then something even stranger happened. I realized I could move, not by walking, not by exerting any effort, but simply by willing it. It felt like swimming through an invisible current, a weightless glide that carried me effortlessly through the air. I wasn't in control. I was being pulled, guided by an unseen force. The park, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now seemed foreign and unsettling. The trees, the pathways, the distant hum of traffic, all of it felt unreal, like a mere shadow of the world I once knew. And then, suddenly, I was no longer in the park at all. I drifted through the emptiness for what felt like an eternity, weightless and directionless, until I found myself on a vast, barren road stretching infinitely into the distance. The sky above was dim and colorless, an endless void without sun, moon, or stars. There was no horizon, just a never-ending expanse of nothingness. And I wasn't alone. All around me were other souls, each moving forward in the same steady, unrelenting motion. They were faint, shimmering figures, their forms almost translucent, as if they were barely clinging to existence. And yet, they were undeniably human. I could see their faces, their eyes hollow and distant. None of them spoke. None of them looked at me. What struck me the most was the way they moved. It was not by choice. There was no hesitation, no glancing back, no interaction with one another. They were driven by something unseen, something pulling them forward with a force they could not resist. Their expressions were solemn, resigned, as if they already knew where they were going and had accepted their fate. At first, the pace was slow, deliberate, but soon I realized that we were moving at an unnatural speed. It felt like walking on a conveyor belt, where each step covered far more distance than it should. The urgency grew with every passing moment. The road began to narrow, and an invisible pressure seemed to build around us, forcing us forward. Faster. The further we went, the heavier the air became, thick with something I couldn't quite describe. A deep sense of unease settled into my very being. My confusion turned into fear. Where were we going? What was waiting for us at the end of this road? I tried to slow down, to resist the pull, to understand what was happening, but I couldn't. My body, or whatever form I was in, refused to obey. It was as if I had become a passenger in my own existence, trapped in an unstoppable tide. The road continued to twist and descend, spiraling into darkness. Shadows loomed on either side, stretching unnaturally like living entities, and then, faint at first, I heard it. An eerie sound drifting through the oppressive silence. At first it was nothing more than a distant murmur, barely audible over the unnatural stillness, but as we progressed the sound grew louder, clearer. Cries of anguish, desperate wails, tortured screams echoing through the void. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before. These were not mere sounds. They were expressions of torment, raw and unfiltered, filled with suffering so profound that it seeped into me, wrapping itself around my soul. The voices did not just scream, they bled despair, radiating a pain that had no end, no hope of relief. A chill ran through me. The realization dawned slowly at first, then with full paralyzing clarity. This place, this road, was leading us to hell. The thought sent a shiver of terror through me, but there was nothing I could do. There was no escape, no way to turn back. The force driving us forward was absolute, inescapable. And then the road ended. A massive looming gate stood before us, an impossible structure of twisted black metal, its surface carved with the agonized faces of the damned. Their expressions were frozen in perpetual torment, their mouths twisted in silent screams. The air around it pulsed with an energy so dark, so suffocating, that I felt it pressing against me, crushing me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. I wanted this to be a nightmare, nothing more than the hallucination of a dying mind. But it wasn't, and I was about to learn exactly what lay beyond that gate. Inside, the scene before me was more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. Worse than any nightmare. Worse than any depiction of hell I had ever seen or heard of. Rivers of molten lava twisted and coiled through the desolate landscape, cutting through the jagged, scorched earth like veins of fire. The glow of the seething liquid cast eerie, flickering shadows across the tortured land, illuminating the countless souls writhing in endless agony. Their bodies convulsed and contorted as if trying to escape an invisible grip, their hollowed eyes filled with terror and suffering. Their screams tore through the thick, sulfur-choked air, an unholy symphony of despair that never ended. The sound was unbearable, not just because of its volume, but because of the raw, agonized suffering it carried. Each voice was laced with a torment that was beyond physical pain. It was something deeper, something that gnawed at the very core of their being. Demonic figures slithered and prowled among them, monstrous beings with grotesque forms that twisted and shifted in the firelight. They delighted in the agony around them, their cruel laughter ringing out like jagged shards of glass piercing the air. Their eyes gleamed with malice, glowing like embers in the darkness as they moved through the suffering souls, inflicting fresh torment with sadistic glee. They wielded weapons of pain, spiked whips that tore through flesh with every lash, red-hot pokers that seared deep into skin, and other infernal instruments crafted solely for suffering. The demons did not just torture, they relished in it, feeding off the despair of their victims as if it were sustenance. Some souls were chained to enormous burning pillars, their bodies repeatedly consumed by flames, only to regenerate and burn again in a never-ending cycle of horror. Their mouths were open in silent screams when the fire reached its peak, their agony so immense that no sound could escape their lips. Others were submerged in vast boiling lakes of fire, their forms vanishing beneath the surface before emerging once more, gasping for relief that never came. Their cries gurgled up through the molten waves, only to be silenced by the relentless, deafening roar of the flames. Everywhere I turned, there was nothing but suffering. A cycle of eternal torment, a place of punishment where no mercy existed, no reprieve, no escape. The demons took pleasure in their work, their twisted grins stretching wide with delight as they devised new and horrific ways to torment their victims. They whispered words of cruelty into the ears of the damned, mocking them, reminding them of their sins, deepening their despair. The air was thick, not just with smoke and the acrid scent of burning flesh, but with something heavier, a crushing, suffocating weight of hopelessness. It clung to everything, seeping into my very soul, threatening to consume me in its overwhelming despair. No one begged for mercy because there was none to be given. No one cried out for salvation because they knew none would come. This was a place where every last shred of hope had been completely and utterly extinguished. The deeper I moved into this infernal realm, the stronger my horror grew. My mind could barely comprehend the sheer scale of suffering, the never-ending nature of it. This was forever, and those trapped here knew it. And then, amidst the chaos and torment, my eyes caught sight of a lone figure in the distance. He stood apart from the others, not writhing, not thrashing in agony like the rest, but still surrounded by an aura of suffering so intense that it was almost visible. As I drew closer, my breath caught in my throat. Michael Jackson. He was alone, separated from the masses of tormented souls, yet bound by his own unique punishment. Even from a distance, I could feel the immense weight of his suffering, something deeper than even the pain I had seen inflicted upon the others. And then, as if sensing my presence, he slowly turned his gaze toward me. And in his eyes, I saw something that sent a chill through me unlike anything else I had seen in hell. As I stood frozen, staring at the lone figure before me, an eerie silence seemed to settle over this particular part of hell. Michael Jackson was not thrashing like the other souls. He was not screaming, though his pain was evident in every fiber of his being. His once iconic presence had been reduced to something almost unrecognizable. The man who had captivated millions with his music and talent now stood chained, his body racked with suffering. Heavy, blackened chains bound his wrists and ankles, pulsating as if they were alive, tightening every time he moved, restricting him to the small, scorched platform he stood on. His clothes were tattered, burned and torn, barely clinging to his frail body. His skin bore scorch marks, evidence of torments that never ceased. His face, once admired by millions, was contorted with sorrow, not just pain, but deep, unrelenting regret. As I hesitated, debating whether or not to speak, he turned to face me. His eyes, what I saw in them, sent a chill through my very soul. They held a torment deeper than physical suffering, a grief that could not be undone, a knowledge of what he had lost, what he had done, and what he could never escape. Then he spoke. His voice, once so smooth and filled with music, was now weak, hoarse, as if each word cost him immense suffering. "I sold my soul to the devil," he said, his tone filled with anguish. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt my breath catch. Even though I had already grasped the horror of this place, hearing those words from his own lips made it all the more real. There was no denying it. Michael Jackson had made a deal, one that had cost him far more than he had ever imagined. He swallowed hard, as if trying to push past the immense pain that speaking caused him. His eyes flickered with something beyond regret, desperation. "Fame, fortune, I had everything," he continued, his voice breaking. "But it was never enough. I wanted more and more and more until I belonged to him." He cast his gaze downward, his body trembling as if reliving the moment that had sealed his fate. "I thought I was in control. I thought I was making my own choices, but I wasn't. I was being used. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't." He took a slow, shuddering breath and continued. "They told me I would be the greatest, that my influence would be unmatched, that I would be remembered forever." His expression darkened. "But they didn't tell me the price. They didn't tell me what would happen after." His chains suddenly tightened, yanking his body down onto his knees. He gasped in pain, but no scream left his lips, as if he was already too broken to cry out. And then the torment resumed. A searing beam of fire appeared from above, illuminating him like a spotlight, except this light didn't just shine, it burned. It moved with him, ensuring that there was no escape. I realized what it was. Michael Jackson was forever on stage. But this was no performance for adoring fans. This was a punishment, a mockery. The demons in the audience jeered and laughed, their grotesque faces illuminated by the flames. They shouted accusations, insults, every criticism, every whisper of doubt he had heard in life, amplified and thrown back at him. The words pierced him like daggers. Fake, liar, puppet, you thought they loved you? The voices overlapped, distorted, endless. Michael tried to cover his ears, but the chains tightened further, forcing his arms back. His body convulsed as the fire burned his flesh, but it never consumed him. His skin regenerated, only to be scorched again. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the sweat and soot, but the demons only laughed harder. His punishment was never-ending exposure, a twisted reflection of the life he had lived, forced to be watched, forced to perform, forever under the spotlight. And then came the worst part. A massive mirror appeared before him. But this was not just any mirror. It did not reflect his physical self. It reflected his soul. And whatever he saw in it made him recoil in sheer horror. "No, no, please, not again," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos around him. I saw him struggle, his entire being desperate to look away, but unable to. The mirror forced him to relive it all, every compromise, every moment he ignored his conscience, every deal made in the shadows, every innocent soul he had misled with his influence. The worst of it all was the realization in his eyes. There was no escape, no second chances, no redemption, only eternal torment. I felt a deep, gnawing sorrow settle in my chest. I had idolized this man. The world had idolized him. And yet, here he was, fallen, broken, suffering in a way that no one could imagine. I wanted to ask him, was there anything he wished he had done differently? But I already knew the answer. His face said it all. He had traded everything. And now he had nothing. The fire flared brighter, and suddenly a dark force pulled me backward. The last thing I saw was Michael Jackson's tormented expression, his voice carried away in the infernal wind, whispering, "Don't make the same mistake." And then, darkness. I then begin to feel like I'm being pulled by an energy upward while in my regret. Just like the first pulling felt that took me down the path of hell, the same pull began to drag me upward. It was a force I could not resist. As suddenly as I had descended into darkness, I was now ascending into light. The screams and wails of the damned faded into the distance, replaced by an eerie silence. The oppressive weight of despair that had clung to me in hell began to lift, replaced by a sensation of lightness that was almost overwhelming. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for certain. I was leaving hell. The pull grew stronger, and the darkness around me began to dissolve into a brilliant, blinding light. The intense heat of hell vanished, replaced by a cool, calming sensation that enveloped me like a gentle embrace. And then, in just a moment, I regained consciousness. The sterile white walls of the hospital room came into view. The medical staff called my recovery miraculous. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanging looks of disbelief as they checked my vitals. By all medical reasoning, I should not have survived. They recounted how my heart had stopped, how they had done everything they could, and yet I remained unresponsive. And then, against all expectations, I returned. It was clear that no one had truly anticipated this outcome. The way the nurses looked at me, the way the doctors reviewed my charts again and again, searching for an explanation, They had already written me off. 2 days later, as I was wheeled out of the hospital, the world outside seemed transformed. The sky stretched endlessly above me, a striking shade of blue that seemed richer, deeper than I had ever noticed before. Fluffy white clouds drifted lazily, their slow movement oddly soothing. The warmth of the sun touched my skin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually noticed it. The air was fresh, carrying with it the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant sound of laughter, the quiet hum of life continuing all around me. It was as if everything had been renewed. As I looked around, I realized it wasn't the world that had changed. It was me. It was as if I was seeing the beauty of the world for the first time. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and the presence of a loving, non-judgmental higher power. I started working with children who have special needs. There was a purity and a spiritual connection in these kids that I found deeply moving. Despite their challenges, their spirits seemed to radiate a closeness to the divine that I wanted to be part of and nurture. I came to understand the gravity of suicide and how many people never get a second chance like I did. Without my near-death experience, I might have been another tragic statistic. My mission now is to share with others that there is a loving force out there that cares deeply for each of us. It's crucial to reach out for help and not suffer in silence. There is no shame in seeking support, and there will always be someone willing to listen and assist. For anyone feeling hopeless, I urge you to change your mindset. A shift in perspective can lead to a transformation in your life. Embrace the belief that you are valuable and loved. Life is about experiencing, learning from our mistakes, and growing. Each of us is on a unique journey, and every soul has worth. Remember, you are loved, and you are never alone. We ask that you subscribe to our channel to continue to get updated when we share other people's near-death experiences. Thank you. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these powerful stories and creating a space for open, heartfelt conversations. Click the notification bell so you're always updated when we post new content. Together, let's explore the unseen, celebrate the miraculous, and inspire one another to live with love, faith, and wonder.